My mother called me a burden while I was bleeding out in an ambulance. Interesting thing about family betrayal. Sometimes it arrives so casually your brain refuses to process it at first. Not screaming. Not dramatic. Just a text message. Cold enough to split your life into before and after. My name is Myra Whitmore. I'm 34 years old. Cardiology resident. Single mother of 3-year-old twins. And 2 months ago, I learned exactly how much my family believed I was worth. Interesting, honestly. Because some truths only reveal themselves once you stop being useful to people temporarily. The ambulance smelled like antiseptic and burned plastic. Bright fluorescent lights above me. Sirens screaming somewhere outside while pain ripped through my abdomen every time the vehicle turned. I remember staring at the ceiling trying to stay conscious while paramedics pressed gauze against my side. Internal bleeding. Possible splenic rupture. Emergency surgery waiting ahead. And somehow, the thing terrifying me most wasn't dying. It was my children. Huge difference. Interesting thing about motherhood. Your fear reorganizes itself permanently around someone else's survival. Lily and Lucas were 3 years old. Curly dark hair. Sticky hands. The kind of tiny humans who still climbed into my bed during thunderstorms because they believed monsters couldn't enter rooms where moms were present. And at 7:15 that evening, I had exactly 45 minutes to find someone to watch them before surgeons cut me open. Interesting, honestly. Because life-changing moments rarely give you enough time to process them emotionally first. The babysitter needed to leave at 8. I knew that because I managed every detail of our lives carefully. Work schedules. Daycare backups. Emergency contacts. Medication lists. Single mothers become operational systems eventually. Interesting thing about carrying everything alone. Eventually competence starts disguising exhaustion convincingly. Dr. Marcus Smith rode in the ambulance beside me. Emergency physician. Coworker for 2 years. Calm voice. Steady hands. The kind of doctor who could stabilize chaos without raising his heartbeat visibly. Myra. His hand squeezed my shoulder lightly. Stay with me. I nodded weakly. My kids. We'll figure it out. Figure it out. Interesting, honestly. Because strangers sometimes offer more emotional safety in one sentence than family gives across decades. My hands shook violently trying to unlock my phone. Blood smeared across the screen. I dialed my father first. Of course I did. Interesting thing about emotionally neglected children. Even after years of disappointment, our instincts still reach toward parents first during emergencies. 4 rings. Then Dad answered. Impatient immediately. Myra, we're about to leave. What is it? No hello. No warmth. No concern hearing my voice shaking. Interesting, honestly. Because people accustomed to taking from you stop hearing distress clearly after a while. Dad. Pain sliced through my abdomen hard enough to blur my vision briefly. I was in an accident. Silence. I'm going into surgery. Another silence. Not panic. Not concern. Waiting. Like I was interrupting something. Interesting thing about selfish people. They experience your emergencies as scheduling conflicts first. I need someone to watch Lily and Lucas. My babysitter leaves at 8. Please. I actually said please. Interesting, honestly. Because even successful women revert into hopeful daughters under enough fear. Muffled voices sounded behind him. My mother asking something sharply. Vanessa laughing in the background. Then my father said. Hold on. The line went quiet. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. Family group chat notification. Not a private response. A public one. Interesting thing about humiliation. Some people need witnesses even for cruelty. The message came from my mother. Word for word. Myra, you've always been a nuisance and a burden. I stared at the screen, blinking. Certain morphine or blood loss had distorted the sentence somehow. But it stayed the same. Interesting, honestly. Because the brain protects itself briefly when reality becomes too ugly too fast. Second message. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight. Third message. Figure it out yourself. And then. From Vanessa? A laughing emoji. That was it. No concern. No follow-up question. No, are you okay? Just a laughing emoji while I bled into ambulance sheets. Interesting thing about narcissistic family systems. The golden child eventually mistakes cruelty for entertainment. Marcus saw my face change immediately. What happened? I couldn't answer. Not because I was crying. I wasn't. Because something inside me had gone terrifyingly calm instead. Huge difference. Interesting thing about emotional breaking points. They don't always feel explosive. Sometimes they feel like silence. Cold. Precise. Permanent. I need your phone. Marcus handed it over instantly. No questions. I searched emergency nanny services while paramedics adjusted 4 lines beside me. 24-hour emergency childcare. Triple rate booking. Credit card authorization. Babysitter handoff instructions. 4 minutes. That's how long it took complete strangers to show me more compassion than my family managed in 34 years. Interesting, honestly. Because love becomes easier to recognize once cruelty finally stops disguising itself as normal. Marcus watched quietly while I finished arranging everything. You okay? No. I wasn't okay. But interesting thing about high-functioning trauma survivors. We continue solving problems long after emotional collapse should have arrived. Can you screenshot those messages? He looked at my phone screen. Jaw tightening almost invisibly. Then nodded. Yeah. I closed my eyes while the ambulance backed into the emergency bay. Doctors rushing forward. Bright hospital lights flooding the vehicle. Pain roaring through my body again. But underneath all of it, one thought kept repeating calmly inside my head. I'm done. Interesting thing about freedom. Sometimes it begins in the exact same moment abandonment becomes undeniable. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Ruptured spleen. Internal hemorrhaging. One surgeon later told me another 15 minutes without intervention might have killed me. Interesting, honestly. Because while my family sang Taylor Swift lyrics in a stadium, doctors were trying to keep me alive. I spent 5 days recovering in the hospital. 4 drips. Morphine fog. Nurses checking vitals every few hours. And during all 5 days, my phone stayed silent. No calls from my parents. No apology. No flowers. Nothing. Interesting thing about abandonment. Eventually silence becomes louder than insults ever were. Meanwhile, the nanny service sent photo updates every day. Lily eating pancakes. Lucas asleep holding a stuffed dinosaur. Tiny ordinary moments proving strangers were protecting my children while family ignored us completely. And honestly, that hurt more than the text message. Huge difference. Interesting thing about healing. The first stage is usually clarity. Not forgiveness. The first stage of healing is usually clarity. Not forgiveness. Interesting thing about betrayal. Once people finally show you who they are clearly, your nervous system stops confusing pain with love. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and overbrewed coffee. Machines humming softly beside my bed. Heart monitor blinking green rhythms against the dark while rain tapped lightly against the window sometime after midnight. And for the first time in years, nobody needed anything from me. Huge difference. Interesting, honestly. Because caretakers forget what silence feels like once everyone starts treating their sacrifice as infrastructure instead of generosity. Day 2 after surgery? A nurse asked about my emergency contact paperwork. Simple question. Routine question. Who should we call if your condition changes? I stared at the clipboard longer than necessary. Interesting thing about emotionally neglected adults. We hesitate before admitting nobody reliable exists. My Aunt Eleanor. Not my parents. Not my sister. Eleanor. The family black sheep. The woman my mother called difficult for 30 years because she refused to pretend dysfunction was normal. Interesting, honestly. Because healthy people always look disruptive inside toxic systems. Aunt Eleanor arrived that afternoon carrying coffee and fury in equal amounts. 55 years old. Sharp cheekbones. Sharp tongue. The kind of woman who'd spent decades disappointing polite society by telling the truth too directly. She walked into my hospital room, took one look at my face, and immediately knew something catastrophic had happened emotionally. What did they do? Not. How are you? Not. What happened? What did they do? Interesting thing about the one honest person in dysfunctional families. They usually know exactly where the damage came from instinctively. I handed her my phone silently. She read the messages once. Then again slower. By the third read, her entire expression changed. Not shock. Recognition. Like years of suspicion had suddenly become evidence. Interesting, honestly. Because the truth rarely surprises the people already paying attention quietly. She called you a burden. Her voice sounded dangerously calm. While you were bleeding internally. I nodded. And Vanessa. The laughing emoji sat there glowing faintly on the screen like something rotten. Eleanor inhaled sharply through her nose. Then looked directly at me. You're done now. Not a question. Statement. Huge difference. Interesting thing about liberation. Sometimes another person has to give you permission before survival instincts stop arguing with reality. I didn't cry. That part surprised me afterward. No dramatic breakdown. No screaming. Just exhaustion. Bone-deep exhaustion from carrying people who would have let me die inconvenienced. Interesting, honestly. Because emotional collapse often arrives looking exactly like peace initially. On day 3, I asked for my laptop. The nurse hesitated. You should rest. I need to handle something. My voice sounded strange even to me. Calm. Precise. Like someone finalizing paperwork after a long legal dispute. Interesting thing about reaching emotional limits. Decisions become frighteningly easy afterward. I logged into my banking accounts. And there they were. 8 years of automatic transfers. Month after month. Perfectly scheduled. $2,400 mortgage payment. $800 insurance premium. Emergency expenses. Car repairs. Vacation bailouts. Vanessa's temporary setbacks. Interesting, honestly. Because abuse looks very different once spreadsheets translate it into numbers. I opened the transfer settings. Paused briefly. Not because I doubted myself. Because I realized something horrifying. My parents genuinely believed that money belonged to them now. Huge difference. Interesting thing about entitlement. People stop viewing your sacrifice as generosity the second it becomes predictable. I canceled everything. Mortgage transfers. Insurance autopay. Emergency backup account access. Every single connection severed in under 2 minutes. Then I blocked their numbers. Dad. Mom. Vanessa. Done. Interesting, honestly. Because sometimes self-respect looks incredibly quiet from the outside. Marcus stopped by later that afternoon. Still in scrubs. Coffee cup balanced beside a stack of patient charts. He leaned against the doorway studying me carefully. How are you feeling? I almost answered automatically. Fine. That word. God. Interesting thing about high-achieving women. We weaponize fine against ourselves constantly. But instead, I told the truth. Lighter. Marcus nodded slowly like he understood immediately. Then after a moment. Good. No forced sympathy. No advice. No awkward motivational speech. Just good. Interesting, honestly. Because emotionally safe people don't require performances from your pain. The hospital discharged me on Friday morning. 5 days after the accident. Staples across my abdomen. Pain medication in a paper bag. Discharge instructions warning me not to lift heavy objects for 6 weeks. Single motherhood does not care about discharge instructions. Huge difference. Interesting thing about mothers. Recovery becomes logistical immediately once children are involved. The nanny service helped transition Lily and Lucas home carefully. Lucas clung to my leg crying when he first saw the bruising across my stomach. Lily touched the bandages gently and whispered, "Mommy broken?" Interesting, honestly. Because children describe trauma more honestly than adults ever do. Mommy's healing. That felt more accurate. Healing. Not broken. Different. Permanent in some ways. Interesting thing about near-death experiences. They reorganize your tolerance for disrespect permanently. The house felt strange after the hospital. Too quiet. Too clear. Like someone had opened windows inside my brain I didn't realize were locked shut before. No guilt waiting for me. No family obligation buzzing beneath every peaceful moment. Just me. My children. And silence. Interesting, honestly. Because once manipulation disappears, your nervous system initially mistakes peace for emptiness. 2 weeks later. Saturday morning. I stood in the kitchen making pancakes. Lucas stacking toy blocks badly on the floor. Lily helping by destroying them immediately afterward. Sunlight pouring through the windows. Butter sizzling in the pan. Tiny ordinary happiness. And honestly, I hadn't realized how long it had been since my home felt emotionally safe. Interesting thing about toxic family dynamics. They invade your house psychologically even when the people themselves aren't present. Then came the knock. 3 sharp knocks against the front door. Immediate. Authoritative. My entire body tensed automatically. Interesting, honestly. Because trauma teaches your nervous system to anticipate conflict before logic catches up. I looked through the peephole. And froze. Tall man. Silver hair combed neatly backward. Navy overcoat. Sharp blue eyes I hadn't seen in nearly 3 years. Grandpa Thomas. Huge difference. Interesting thing about emotionally complicated families. Sometimes the people who save you are the ones everyone else worked hardest to keep distant. I opened the door slowly. And before I could speak, he pulled me into a hug. Tight enough to hurt my surgical incision slightly. Tight enough to feel real. Mira. His voice cracked on my name. Then he stepped back looking at my face carefully. The bruising. The exhaustion. The healing incision beneath my sweater. And suddenly, his expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Interesting, honestly. Because old men who spent decades protecting family reputations become terrifying once they finally decide truth matters more. I know everything. Not accusation. Not confusion. Certainty. Aunt Eleanor told me. Of course she did. Interesting thing about honest women. They become dangerous the second they stop protecting other people's secrets. Grandpa stepped inside slowly while Lily and Lucas peeked around the kitchen corner curiously. And watching him kneel beside my children. Smiling softly. Asking their names like they mattered immediately. Something painful twisted inside my chest. Because my children barely knew him. Not because he didn't care. Because my parents spent years making sure distance remained convenient. Interesting, honestly. Because controlling families isolate relationships, threatening their narrative quietly. Grandpa sat at my kitchen table afterward holding a coffee mug carefully between both hands. Federal judge for 40 years. Still carrying himself like courtrooms organized themselves automatically around his voice. I've watched this for years. No drama. No exaggeration. Just truth. The favoritism. The money. The way they treat Vanessa versus you. I looked down at the table. Part of me still wanted to defend my parents automatically. Even then. Interesting thing about neglected daughters. We protect the people hurting us long after they stop deserving it. Grandpa leaned forward slightly. Do you still have records? What records? The transfers. My stomach tightened. Of course I had records. Every payment. Every date. Every emergency bailout disguised as temporary help. I kept spreadsheets. Color-coded spreadsheets. Interesting, honestly. Because some subconscious part of me always knew the truth would matter someday. Grandpa nodded once after I answered. Good. Then he reached into his coat pocket and removed a cream-colored envelope. Elegant paper. Embossed lettering. His 70th birthday invitation. The whole family will be there next Saturday. I stared at him carefully. Why are you giving me this? His eyes met mine directly. Because after 40 years on the federal bench, I learned something important about facts. Pause. They eventually demand witnesses. Facts eventually demand witnesses. Interesting thing about truth. People can ignore it privately for years. Until someone respected says it out loud publicly. Grandpa Thomas sat at my kitchen table holding his coffee cup with both hands while Lily and Lucas climbed across the living room carpet building towers out of plastic blocks. And suddenly, the entire room felt emotionally different. Safer somehow. Interesting, honestly. Because validation changes the atmosphere around pain immediately. You kept records? I nodded slowly. Every transfer. Grandpa's jaw tightened. Good. Not praise. Not surprise. Confirmation. The kind judges give when evidence aligns perfectly with instincts they've trusted for decades. Interesting thing about observant people. They usually know the truth long before proof arrives. I opened my laptop. Spreadsheet tabs lined across the bottom of the screen. Mortgage. Insurance. Emergency expenses. Vanessa. 8 years documented with terrifying precision. Interesting, honestly. Because survival sometimes disguises itself as organization. Grandpa adjusted his reading glasses and studied the numbers quietly. Month after month. $2,400 mortgage payments. $800 insurance premiums. Roof repairs. Car payments. Fashion business loans. Vacation bailouts. Medical deductibles. Every sacrifice laid out in neat digital rows. And honestly, Seeing someone else look horrified by it changed something inside me permanently. Huge difference. Interesting thing about emotional abuse. You stop recognizing how abnormal it is once it becomes routine enough. $360,000. Grandpa said the number slowly. Like even he needed to hear it aloud to believe it fully. While completing residency. While raising twins alone. His eyes lifted toward me finally. And they called you a burden. There it was. The sentence. The sentence that split denial apart completely. Interesting, honestly. Because healing often begins the second another person says, no. That wasn't normal. I looked toward the living room. Lucas had fallen sideways laughing while Lily stole blocks from his tower proudly. Tiny ordinary chaos. Tiny beautiful chaos. And suddenly, I realized something horrifying. My children were growing up watching me accept mistreatment calmly. Interesting thing about cycles. Children learn love by watching what their parents tolerate. That thought stayed with me the rest of the night. Long after Grandpa left. Long after the twins fell asleep. Long after silence settled across the apartment. I stood alone in the kitchen staring at the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop screen. And for the first time, I stopped seeing generosity. I saw exploitation. Huge difference. Interesting, honestly. Because perspective changes instantly once guilt loses control of the narrative. 3 days later, Aunt Eleanor arrived carrying takeout containers and rage. The woman weaponized honesty the way surgeons use scalpels. Precisely. Without apology. She dropped into the kitchen chair, flipping through printed bank statements while I reheated noodles at the stove. Every few pages, her expression darkened further. This is financial abuse. I froze slightly. That phrase. Interesting thing about emotionally neglected adults. We struggle to label mistreatment correctly once it's been normalized since childhood. They needed help. Eleanor looked up sharply. For 8 years? Silence. While your mother bought designer handbags? Another silence. While your father retired early? The noodles boiled quietly behind me. Steam rising through kitchen light while my entire understanding of family rearranged itself internally. Interesting, honestly. Because manipulation survives longest when the victim keeps reframing exploitation as kindness. They called me practical. I don't know why I said it. Maybe because suddenly, I understood how much that word shaped my life. Practical. Reliable. Independent. The daughter who could handle disappointment quietly. The daughter who never needed anything emotionally. Interesting thing about favoritism. One child gets adored. The other gets assigned functionality. Eleanor leaned back, crossing her arms. You know what your problem is? I almost laughed. That's a dangerous opening sentence from you. You confuse being needed with being loved. The room went silent instantly. Huge difference. Interesting, honestly. Because the most painful truths usually sound obvious once spoken aloud. I looked away first. Toward family drawings taped to the refrigerator. Lily's crooked crayon hearts. Lucas's dinosaur scribbles. Children who hugged me every day without requiring performance first. And suddenly, I realized how unnatural my relationship with my parents actually was. Interesting thing about healthy love. It doesn't demand self-erasure as proof. The invitation sat on my counter all week. Grandpa Thomas's 70th birthday. Cream paper. Gold lettering. Formal enough to feel dangerous. And honestly, I considered not going. More than once. Interesting thing about confrontation. Sometimes peace feels easier than justice initially. But every time I imagined skipping it, I remembered the ambulance. The laughing emoji. Figure it out yourself. And most importantly, my children. The future version of them watching how their mother responded when people treated her like she didn't matter. Huge difference. Interesting, honestly. Because boundaries aren't just personal decisions. They become family blueprints. The morning of the party? I stood in front of my bathroom mirror fastening pearl earrings with trembling fingers. Navy dress. Simple makeup. Professional. Controlled. I wasn't going there for revenge. That mattered. Interesting thing about emotionally mature people. They stop confusing accountability with cruelty eventually. Lily twirled in circles beside the bed wearing tiny sparkly shoes. Lucas refused to wear his bow tie unless I called him Sir Dinosaur first. Tiny rituals. Tiny normal moments keeping me anchored while anxiety twisted beneath my ribs. You okay, Mommy? Lily's voice caught me off guard. Children notice everything. Especially tension adults think they're hiding well. I crouched beside her carefully because my incision still ached slightly when I moved too quickly. Yeah. Then I corrected myself immediately. Actually. Pause. I'm nervous. Interesting, honestly. Because healthy parenting sometimes means showing children honesty instead of performance. Why? Sometimes grown-ups need to tell the truth even when it's scary. Lily thought about that seriously. Then nodded like it made perfect sense. Children understand integrity faster than adults, honestly. Grandpa Thomas's estate sat across 3 acres of manicured land outside Charlotte. White columns. Wraparound porch. Luxury vehicles lining the circular driveway. The kind of old-money elegance that whispers authority instead of showing it off loudly. Interesting thing about wealthy families. They build beautiful houses capable of hiding ugly dynamics incredibly well. More than 40 cars filled the property. Entire extended family already inside. Aunts. Uncles. Cousins. People who spent decades believing carefully managed versions of our family story. And today? That story was about to collapse publicly. Huge difference. Interesting, honestly. Because dysfunctional systems survive through collective performance first. I stepped inside holding Lily's hand while Lucas clung sleepily to my hip. Crystal chandeliers overhead. Champagne glasses clinking. String quartet music drifting through polished hallways. And immediately, I felt them see me. My parents near the fireplace. Vanessa beside them wearing a designer dress worth more than my monthly rent. 3 faces freezing simultaneously. Interesting thing about guilty people. They recognize consequences before they understand details. Mom recovered first. Of course she did. Social performance was her strongest survival skill. Oh, sweetheart. Air kiss. Minimal contact. Like we were distant acquaintances instead of mother and daughter. We heard you've been struggling since the accident. There it was already. The narrative. Interesting, honestly. Because manipulative people start rewriting reality immediately once control feels threatened. Vanessa floated beside her smiling perfectly. Nothing too serious, I hope? I stared at her carefully. I almost died. Tiny flicker. Barely visible. Then her smile returned. Well. She touched my arm lightly. You look good now. Interesting thing about emotionally shallow people. They mistake visible recovery for healed damage constantly. Across the room? Grandpa Thomas watched the entire interaction silently holding a glass of whiskey. And when our eyes met, he gave the smallest nod. Not comfort. Permission. Huge difference. Interesting, honestly. Because powerful people rarely interrupt liars immediately. They wait until the audience is large enough first. I went no contact with my family for 7 years, then 43 missed calls arrived in one night.